Okay, ad agency. The question, name the new vehicle. The answer, multi-dimensional cross-trainer. Would you buy it? Well, somebody did. We'll find out who this week on Motoring 2001.
TSN's Motoring 2001 is brought to you by Quaker State Motor Oils, formulated for the vehicles you drive and the way you drive them. And Midas. Keep a good thing going. Go Midas.
If you're a regular viewer of this program or like to read auto magazines, I'm sure there are times when you wonder if some car makers have given up manufacturing brand new, out-of-the-box cars. I mean, usually they seem to opt for the new and improved version or a derivative of a showroom sibling. Incidentally, this is the new and improved Acura 1.6, now known as the 1.7. More on that later, but you know, it seems all the new vehicles are now truck-based. Examples, Pontiac Aztek, the Mazda Tribute, the Ford Escape, the Toyota Sequoia, and so on. Not that there's anything wrong with that. People obviously want them because they're buying them. But you know, for many years, aside from a pickup truck, you had two choices, sport utility or minivan. And we all know that sport utility owners wouldn't be caught dead in a minivan, and minivan owners know how practical they are, but admit they're not sexy. Well, along comes the Lexus RX 300, which brought together the sport utility and the minivan, albeit at a price. Then there was the BMW X5, and now to make your shopping adventure more confusing, we've got a new kid on the block, and he's simply called the MDX.
There's no secret we're a little bit late to the SUV game. We had some difficulties with R&D and breaking free engineers to actually design this vehicle. We knew we were losing 15 to 20% of our customers every year to the SUV market. But also we had an opportunity to really study the market and study the customer and take our time by providing an SUV that is really no compromise. Our primary competition is the RX 300, the ML 320, and the X5. These are next generation SUVs that are trying to provide car-like handling and amenities for the luxury SUV owner, combined with an SUV exterior and utility. As the market matures, you find that people are migrating away from the traditional truck-based SUVs, and they're getting a little tired of the basically miserable driving dynamics of a truck-based SUV, and they're migrating towards more car-like, which is what we're trying to achieve.
Well, it's the only luxury sports utility that is manufactured in Canada. We're very proud of the fact that it's going to be built at our factory in Alliston, Ontario, and will be built alongside the Honda Odyssey.
The concept of the exterior design was the southwest of the United States, kind of vast open spaces, but more conceptually we wanted to give a target for the stylist, and we said, so we use an animal analogy, and we use the rhino. The reason that we picked the rhinoceros is because they have a low, wide, strong, powerful stance, and we wanted to evoke that emotion in the vehicle. The powertrain is a 3.5 liter V6 SOHC VTEC engine. It's matched to a 5-speed automatic transmission that goes to a rear differential, which is kind of a revolutionary breakthrough four-wheel drive system called the VTM4, which stands for Variable Torque Management Four-Wheel Drive System. It works in 4 basic modes. It works when you accelerate. It anticipates the vehicle dynamics and acceleration and transfers torque, so no wheel slip occurs. The second mode is when you don't need that acceleration and you don't need that torque transfer and you want to save fuel economy. We can completely turn off the rear wheel drives and then revert to a front wheel drive vehicle that provides the best fuel economy when cruising. Now, when you're cruising down the road and your wheels start to slip, that brings along the third mode of the VTM4 system, which when slippage occurs, torque is automatically transferred to the rear to counteract it. And then the fourth mode is a lock mode. In low speed situations, or if you're stuck, or if you're potentially getting stuck, you can lock up the rear differential to act as a solid axle to get you out of those situations.
Acura is your luxury division, but did you ever think you'd see the day when you'd have a sport utility in your showroom?
Well, we always knew we'd get one sooner or later, and we've waited a long time, and I'm sure that now we have received it and we're going to launch it. The wait was definitely worthwhile. This is huge.
Because they don't even know what they're missing. But once they drive the MDX, they're going to know what they've been missing, and we believe it's going to be a home run.
Okay, so I'm a tree hugger. What of it? Coming up later on Kenzie's Corner. I bet you say that to all the boys.
You know, before the introduction of this all-new S60 sedan, putting Volvo and sporty in the same sentence, well, people might have started to laugh. But that's all about to change, as you're about to find out on this edition of Test Drive. The new S60 comes in 3 very different flavours: mild, medium and the red-hot T5, which brings a road-ripping 247 horsepower and 243 pounds-feet of torque. While there is the merest hint of turbo lag, once you're moving, the T5 romps through the 100k mark in under 7 seconds. You can also choose from either a 5-speed manual or a 5-speed automatic transmission. Sure, the do-it-yourselfer is the best bet to enjoy the power, but for everyday use, take Volvo's Geartronic Manumatic. It delivers the best of both the drive and driven worlds. Flat-out acceleration does not suffer to any extent. You can hold a gear through a corner, and the box is smart enough to shift according to your driving habits. In order to qualify as a good driver's car, you've got to be able to find the right driving position quickly and easily, and on the S60 it's a piece of cake. You not only get an 8-way power seat with 3-position memory, you also get a steering wheel that tilts and telescopes. The instrumentation, clean and clear, and all of the controls, well, they're logical and large enough to operate even with a big set of mitts like this on. But there is a drawback, and you knew there had to be. From here to the other side of the center console is grey on grey on grey. What they should have done was to have taken some of this attractive fake wood trim and dotted it around on the interior, and then it would have been both attractive and functional. The S60 borrows its rear suspension from the larger S80 and its front suspension from the V70 wagon. Each end has been retuned to deliver a very balanced yet comfortable car. Through the pylons, body roll is next to non-existent and understeer is benign. When it does appear, the optional stability control system steps in to right that wrong. One of the S60's key attributes is its platform. Normally you don't talk about such things, but this one is twice as stiff as the V70 wagon and 20% stiffer than the flagship S80. Now, having a stiff platform does 2 things for you. It gives you a great base of operations for the suspension, but more importantly, it gives you a very strong structure in case the worst happens. In fact, this platform's so good, Volvo's parent company Ford are actually contemplating using it outside of the Volvo family. The entire brake system comes from the larger and heavier S80, which is probably just as well, and it includes a top-notch anti-lock system. Fortunately, the whole lot works flawlessly, as a little girl can attest. She and I both escaped a very nasty situation because of this top-notch system. The cardinal rule is that necessity is invariably the mother of invention, and so it was on this S60. They put in this nice flap that lifts up to prevent anything that's placed in the trunk from sliding up against the split folding rear seats. Why is that such an important facet? Well, quite simply, without that, trying to retrieve anything from the back, let's just say you would have no dignity left. The other thing I don't like, whilst the deck lid goes up and out of the way and they've used proper cantilever hinges, the opening itself, well, it's very restricted.
On the safety front, there are the usual front and side airbags, plus an inflatable side curtain that prevents your head from crashing through the side glass in the event of a side impact. You also get Volvo's side impact protection system and whips, a system designed to reduce whiplash. You know, while the S in S60 stands for sedan, it could in reality stand for sporty, saucy, or even sophisticated. This vehicle is all of that and then some, especially if we go with the road-ripping, corner-gobbling T5 version that we're testing.
With the big trucks dominating this week's program, we thought it would be nice to remind you that car makers are still building new cars, like our long-term Honda S2000 Roadster. You know, I was knocked out by this car when Honda first introduced it about a year ago. We were even given a chance to tear around the racetrack in Calgary, and that's where the S2000 shines. I mean, we're talking a 2-liter double overhead cam VTEC engine pumping out 240 horsepower at 8,300 RPM with a 9,000 RPM red line. As someone once said, to enjoy the S2000, you gotta drive it like you stole it. Yet the S2000 is just as much fun cruising the streets. The 6-speed manual transmission is simply silky smooth. I do have a few pet peeves though, and we'll check those out on our next update.
Our Midas tip of the week concerns a couple of winter necessities. I hope you've all got one of these on hand. If you're working with last year's, make sure you've got a good edge on it, and it's not broken, and it's flexible enough to do the job. There's another product here that you can use called Snow Off, which is a cover that goes right across the windshield and prevents ice and snow from getting on or adhering to the windshield. I haven't tried it, but I hear it works well. You peel it off and drive away without having to scrape in the morning. Here's one that I have tried, the Rain-X De-Icer, a really handy product to keep inside your vehicle. You just spray it on the glass and it dissolves frost and helps you get ice released from the windows quickly in the morning. Really helpful for the side glass where it takes forever to get enough interior heat to break it free. But you'll need one of these too, so make sure you've got both. That's your Midas tip of the week.
Second generation RAV4's exterior styling is very aggressive compared with that of previous one. And more male customers will like it. But still, I expect a lot of female customers. And regarding the interior styling, it has a very fun to drive image styling. It also makes RAV customers satisfied. It's all new 4-cylinder engine, and it has more power. For example, it has 184 horsepower, and it is 21 horsepower more than that of previous engine. And also, it is very light engine, about 40 pounds lighter than previous one. This engine makes RAV very attractive.
What we tried to do is make the EL a real Acura product. So this time we added things like the wood print interior trim, as well as the chrome accents, a little sportier seat design, and an overall more quality, more upscale overall interior feel, I would say. The engine is it's a 1.7 liter VTEC motor, 127 horsepower, and 114 foot-pounds of torque. And the torque is available at a much lower RPM than the previous car. So it has a much quicker or better response off-the-line acceleration. It's really a complete model change, totally new vehicle, and vastly improved in all those areas. Actually, the first generation has been a really popular car, selling about an average of 8,000 units per year, and we're hoping to exceed that target with the new model.
Unlike the Honda Odyssey, the third row of seats in the MDX don't fold flush into the floor, although they do fold forward flush with the floor in a 50-50 split. Same with the second row with a 60-40 split. But the question is always, what do you do with the headrests? Well, Acura's thought of everything. You take them out, and down here, they have a neat little storage bin that includes a couple of spots for each headrest. And you know, it's those small things that mean a lot. And you know what? I don't even want to think what the replacement cost would be on one of those. All right, let's head to the garage and join Bill Gardner.
Well, Brad, if you've got a brand new vehicle like that MDX, stalling is a situation you're not likely to run into. But if your car's got miles on it and it's fuel injected, which is just about every car or truck built since the mid-80s, stalling can be a problem. Quite often people complain that when they get into traffic, come up to a stop sign or a traffic light, whatever, and they're just, you know, trying to give it a little bit of throttle and then maybe backing off for traffic, they'll have a situation where the idle speed will be unstable. It'll kind of hunt around. It may go a little bit high, a little bit low, and stall. Sometimes the car will catch itself and not quite stall, but you can just tell that the idle speed's unstable. Now, quite often, what will happen is the car will restart and drive away just fine, but when you get back into traffic, you've got a stalling situation. And the problem is quite often an easy fix, and it just involves a cleaning operation. So one of the first things you should do is clean the throttle body in the car. That's what we're going to talk about this week. And it's definitely a prerequisite anytime you've got this stalling situation. Before you change any parts, this is what you want to do. Now, the area that we're talking about cleaning, the throttle body, requires that you remove a couple of parts to get to it. Usually this corrugated intake hose just takes a screwdriver to take a couple of clamps off and wriggle that carefully off. Make sure you don't tear it. Set it aside, and usually we take the upper half of the air cleaner off, which involves a couple of screws or wing nuts, and set it aside. That way you can get into this area. Now, the throttle body is this component right here that you're looking at right here, and what this does is it meters the amount of air entering the engine. There's no fuel entering the engine at this point. The fuel is going in downstream at the injectors. But in this area here, the throttle body, all the air that enters the engine is metered through there. The mass airflow sensor is right here, and it gives an electronic signal to the computer to tell it how many grams per second of air are entering the engine. And when you step on the throttle inside the car, you're opening that blade down inside the bore and allowing more air into the engine. When it comes back to idle, the rest position, that blade almost closes in the bore. Not completely, but it almost closes. If you looked at it against a light, there'd be a sliver of light around the perimeter of that bore. The reason that blade doesn't close completely is so that it doesn't jam in the bore, and also so that when the engine comes back to idle, it has a little bit of air passing around the blade to keep the engine idling. There's also a bypass channel up here where air enters the engine, but when you come quickly back to a stop, if the bore is dirty or the blade is dirty, you will get a stalling problem because the idle air control motor hasn't had time to react. So the way you fix it is you spray this intake cleaner into the perimeter of the bore. We use a cleaner called Injector Medic or Intake Medic, and you take an old toothbrush and you scrub the perimeter of the bore with your old toothbrush, and you scrub the back of the blade, the part that you can't see, and the tip, the edge of the blade. Clean this whole area out, and that black gunge that you see coming out there is an example of the kind of carbon that gets into that system. And it does have to be cleaned periodically, and it doesn't take a whole lot of carbon to make the engine stall. Now here's where the fuel enters the engine, further downstream at the fuel injectors. You can see the front three on the front bank of this V6. In the back here where you can't see is the other three injectors. This is where the fuel enters the engine. You'll often see specials on for injector flushing or injector cleaning. What we do then is we run a can of concentrated cleaner through the engine to clean out these injectors, which are an important thing to do during a tune-up. That'll improve your throttle response and your performance and fuel economy. However, it's important that you clean the throttle body as well. The two operations go hand in hand, and often people overlook cleaning the throttle body when they're tuning up the engine or addressing a stalling complaint. Now, some vehicles are worse than others. Dodge minivans with V6s, when that throttle body's dirty, it's almost a guaranteed stalling situation. GM 2.8 and 3.1 V6s, when that is dirty, you're going to have a stalling complaint. And it's quite often as simple as cleaning that area with the Injector Medic cleaner, and the old toothbrush will quite often resolve that stalling problem 9 out of 10 times, as a matter of fact. The two go hand in hand. Anytime you're doing a tune-up or having that complaint, these are the things to do. And one more tip, don't use the toothbrush over again. I found that out the hard way. That taste is awful. I'm just kidding. Whatever you do, get a new toothbrush. Till next week, I'm Bill Gardner for Motoring 2001.
Nissan sells a special edition of the Sentra in California called the Sentra CA. CA, California. Get it? Now this thing is so environment friendly, you can actually drive to work 10 miles and back every day and pollute less than a conventional car would sitting in your driveway. Now they do this with special evaporative emission controls, engine management systems, and catalytic converters that make this car virtually as clean as an electric or a hybrid. And yet, to all intents and purposes, it's a dead nuts conventional car. Gasoline engine rides and drives like a normal Sentra. Why can't we get this car in Canada? Simple. Our gasoline. You see, sulfur kills exhaust emission control systems, particularly the sophisticated units used on this Sentra. And Canadian gas is allowed to have much higher sulfur content than California gas. Now, Irving Oil on the East Coast has introduced a low sulfur fuel, but it's certainly not available across the country. Now, eventually, we are going to have low sulfur fuel in this country. We're not going to do it, though, until the government mandates it, because the gasoline companies don't want to go to the expense. But hey, if we have the opportunity to make major gains in emission control systems in a conventional car without the hassle, cost, and infrastructure requirements that electrics or hybrids or even fuel cells require, well, it seems to me a couple of pennies per liter is a small price to pay. After all, gasoline is already the cheapest fluid you can buy. It's cheaper than liquor, it's cheaper than Coke, it's even cheaper than water. For the sake of all these beautiful trees, it's got to be worth it. I'm Jim Kenzie.
We've only spent a brief time in the new Acura MDX, and Graham will be taking a closer look on a future test drive, but a few final thoughts. As you might expect, this company has done its homework. It looks great, it drives well, and you know it's got a turning radius like a Civic. And they've probably set the benchmark for this segment. But remember, it wasn't that long ago that Honda did the same with minivans with a much improved Odyssey. In fact, this one's got more dirt on it than most sport utilities. So the question is, let's say you meet the demographics of the new MDX, which is mom and dad, 2 kids, and a dog. You go in the showroom, you see these cars side by side. You look at the Odyssey, it's larger, more cargo space, and at least $10,000 cheaper. What are you going to do? You're going to buy the Odyssey, right? Maybe not. As Acura says, many people today are buying image, and they figure they're losing 15 to 20% of their customers who want this kind of vehicle. And Acura really had no choice but to build it. That's it for now. We'll see you next time out as we continue to bring you more stories about cars and the people who drive them.
TSN's Motoring 2001 has been brought to you by Quaker State Motor Oils, formulated for the vehicles you drive and the way you drive them. And Midas. Keep a good thing going. Go Midas.